So kind of jumping off of that, I know when I visited y'all, game's still in development. So I'm always curious about like, what are some ideas that you had that weren't able to make it to the final game, but now that the game's out, can you tell us about any like features that you had that were left on the cutting room floor, or especially like, I know we talked about ideas for flaws that didn't make it. But yeah, I also, when you talk about choices that you make throughout the game, it's like, you at some point you gotta hone in, you gotta lock in what it is that you're actually putting out.
Sure.
But are there any ideas that you can share that, you weren't able to do this time around, but you are considering for a future game or future DLC or anything like that?
Well, I mean, there's a handful of things that jump to my mind as we either were working on this and then pulled back on it, or we kind of changed what it was, or we just didn't even do it at all, even though it was something I still think is important, but I wanted to do it right. So something like the Protectorate faction, they're not a joinable faction. You interact with them. They're kind of the bad guys in the second half of the game because of things that go on. They were a joinable faction initially. Like, we wanted to do that. And you can tell that even through Paradise Island. There's a lot of content where you're interacting with the Protectorate. But we don't let you join them. You don't gain any rep with them. And that was a deliberate choice because it was going to be too expensive, like brass tacks. Like, we weren't going to have enough time to actually fully flesh out all of the content for a whole nother faction, including their faction quest line and everything that goes along with it. So at that point we were like, okay, well, like we have Auntie's Choice, we have Order of the Ascendant, we know that's going to be really strong. And we can still take the Protectorate and make them a core piece of what's going on, but you just won't have that joinable aspect of it. That said, like, there's still a lot of those elements as, again, as a faction that you're kind of dealing with throughout, in terms of, you could see their whole arc as well. And you could see from like how they've grown and what they care about and how that kind of plays out over the long term. So that was one of the ones where I would have loved to actually go through and do all of that. And maybe it's even a learning for the next project, which is like, hey, if I feel strongly about a faction like this, let's make sure that we can go all the way with that, even if we have to cut other elements of the game to kind of make sure that happens. Let's see, we had the disguise system. So, I was not a fan of the disguise system from the first game because the way that it worked, it kind of hurt exploration, which is like you were kind of timed in areas you could be in. So it made it so you couldn't explore very much while you were disguised and going in places. And so I was like, all right, well, I want a new system in place. But honestly, we couldn't come up with a system that we actually liked that was going to work for us. So initially, we had talked about like a New Vegas style system where you just wear clothing of people. And then that's your disguise. Sure. And, if you're talking to people, like, they can see through it after a certain point or whatever. The problem with that, though, is then it starts to really snowball if you do it right, which is like, all right, so like all of this stuff in the entire game, we have all of these factions. Let's say you dress up as Protectorate. Are they going to treat you in what way is each faction going to treat you, and each person in that faction, depending on, and like it gets really, really wild very quickly. You could also just say, well, we won't talk about what you're wearing sometimes and it doesn't matter, but then it becomes super inconsistent, and then players are like, I don't know when I'm disguised and when I'm not disguised, or when it matters and it doesn't matter. So in the future, I would actually like that, to do that type of system. I think it's a good system. I think we need to think through a little bit more of like how to implement that in a big RPG, something that makes sense and feels good to players while also being reminiscent of maybe that more realistic, like I'm putting something on and I get to go do a thing. I think that there's something there. We just need to kind of work through some of those issues. So that was something we dumped early. And then we even had stuff in prototype that didn't even make it out of prototype, but we were just playing around with. Like, we had an alarm system initially. So we had a thing where if you got seen, an alarm would go off, and you had a certain amount of time that you could go and like disable the alarm before reinforcements would come in. It was like a whole thing. We didn't go too far with that. We played around with it in prototype for a bit with our stealth gameplay, and we ended up dropping it because we were like, well, here's what it would take to actually implement this correctly in all of these areas. Is that actually worth? Is the juice, is the squeeze, the juice worth the squeeze on something like that? And the answer for us was like, probably not. We can probably spend more time working on these other systems instead and get those kind of really where they need to be. So there's a lot of stuff like that ends up coming into play as you're making a game, especially one that's taken 6 years to do. Like, you have a lot of ideas, and a lot of them end up like, well, we just can't do that this time. We'll try it for next time, or maybe it was a cool idea initially, and then we started putting it in, and we're like, Jesus, this sucks. Like, get rid of that thing. That happens a lot, where it's just like, we thought that was gonna be great, it was not, and so just nuke it. Like, don't talk about this thing ever again. Let's move on.
Yeah, I thought Indiana Jones did a pretty good job with the disguises thing. I don't know if you've had a chance to. I don't know if you get a chance to play any other games over the last 6 years while you're neck deep in Outer Worlds too. But
Yeah, no, I played Indiana Jones. I didn't finish it. I got about halfway through. My son took over my playthrough. So I was playing it, and I put it down, and I went to go do something else. And I came back, and he already played like a few hours, and I was like, all right, I guess it's your playthrough now. So I was sitting with him, watching him play, and we were, he really enjoyed it too. So I think they have something good there. But yeah, I agree. The way they handle some of the disguise stuff is interesting, and definitely something to look at as as we're looking for maybe the next game.
Yeah.
You guys, Brandon, you guys are all clearly it's a studio full of a ton of talent, because your reputation as a one of the top RPG houses in the industry has only been strengthened this year with the 3 games that you guys have shipped. But there is a guy, I'm just curious, like, with so much talent in the building, and particularly like Josh Sawyer as just this, like, if we had a video game Hall of Fame or an RPG developer Hall of Fame, he'd be in it, I think. Do you ever poke him for like advice or to get like feedback on things you're doing, or do you just kind of like leave him alone to do whatever he's doing? I'm just sort of curious how that works in sort of an inter-office dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, it's really damn cool having RPG legends with you. You can kind of walk over to and go like, hey, what do you think of this thing? Like, as an example, with Josh, we had our different equipment, our different weapons and whatnot, and the way that we made them was similar to New Vegas in that we don't just open up every weapon type initially. Like if you want, let's say you want to start shooting quickly, right? You want a single type of weapon, like a one-handed weapon that can shoot fast, and like that's the kind of character you want to build. We don't just give you a submachine gun immediately. Like we might give you, all right, you start off with your pistol, and then you can like put a mod on it that can do like burst fire, and then you can do like, so you kind of build towards this whole thing. And so we had built out the tier systems of all of our weapons, and when we wanted players to get like the more advanced versions of some of these player fantasies for their weapons and whatnot. And so Josh looked over all of that, and he was like, all right, well, this is what I would modify in here, and like have you thought about this thing? And like then we talk back and forth all the time, and he plays through the game, and we're constantly asking him questions about like what his thoughts are on things, and he does the same thing. He asks us for like, hey, what do you think about this idea that I have on the next thing? And we'll work through like all the positives and negatives that we see for that. And, it's not even just that. Like I'm working directly with Leonard Boyarsky, who helped make Fallout. He was the co-creator of Fallout. Mm-hmm. I talk to Tim Kaine all the time. He made Fallout. Like these are legends that like, I may not agree with everything that they say. Our sensibilities are not like 100% in alignment, but like, I know that when I'm talking to them about something, I'm getting a true fucking genius mind when it comes to that stuff. And they're like, yeah, here's if you do this, here's likely what's going to happen with that. If that's what you want, then you're on the right track. If that's not what you want, like we should probably rethink that, and here's something you could do. And I'm like, yeah, you're right, that would do that thing. That's not a good idea. Let's try this thing instead. So it helps save a lot of time, and it's also like a sanity check where you're just like, look, man, if they come back and they're like, I'm not feeling it, then you're like, yeah, okay, we need to probably work on something a little bit more.
If you're enjoying this clip of Unlocked, don't miss the full episode. You can find the link in the description below. Yeah. Well, I know we've got to let you go in a few minutes here. My last question before I toss it back to Michael, as I'm getting ready to really dive in head first, I'm curious, what's your personal favorite character build that you've run so far? Because I imagine you've got like hundreds of them that you've iterated on and tried out, but like, what jumps to mind as a favorite character build for you so far?
In these kinds of RPGs, I always make like a stealth sniper character. Like I can't help myself.
Me too, man.
And so, but I was very purposefully, when I was doing build testing, not doing that, because I was like, I will naturally just go and start doing those things. So I left that to other people, and I was like, I'll watch what they're doing and make sure that it's okay. And I was looking through all of that, but so I won't say that, even though like I think there's a pretty good build I made. It was good enough to where right before the game ship we had to like completely nerf some stuff that was happening. We were like, all right, if you take this and this together, you can actually do like 2,000 damage in the very beginning of the game with some stuff. So we had to like modify some stuff there. But I think my favorite is probably when I was doing my very hard playthrough. One of the things that I had done was I built a character that was completely different than I normally would, which is I typically do glass cannon, but for that I can't. So I built a character that's built on like heavy engineering and heavy science, and some medical. And the reason being, like, heavy engineering gives you good damage resistance, and it also has like a lot of the damage resistance type perks that you can take they're going to kind of help you survive a little bit. With science, you can apply status effects really fast. And each damage type gives you a certain status effect when you fill up a bar. And so high science means you can fill up that bar really fast, pop an effect, and then keep doing it again. And then medical means I can just use my inhaler a lot more, and so I can do a lot more healing and stuff. So I built a character that basically used a revolver from very early on in the game, and I modified it to have shock damage. And so shock, when it fills up its bar, it actually does almost like a chain lightning out to everything that's around it and starts zapping things, but it also stuns and paralyzes the target for like a short period of time. And so I did that, and I gave it exploding rounds. So it was AoE chaining. Basically, when I hit somebody, everybody was getting hit with the shock damage. So everybody was popping off those status effects, and so everybody was chaining into themselves. And so like I would, like, even on very hard, I would get a group of 4 or 5 people that were next to each other, and they would just get obliterated in seconds. And even for the ones that didn't, like if it was like a one-on-one, I couldn't like burn them down as quickly, but I was like basically stunning them in like chain stunning them over and over with that. So that was actually probably my favorite. I had the most fun playing around with that and trying like different types of ways to like get that to pop off, throwing shock grenades and hitting stuff. And yeah, I just had a lot of fun with that one.
I'm taking notes. Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Send that over to the guides team.
Thanks for checking out this clip from Unlocked, IGN's weekly Xbox show. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to watch the full episode at youtube.com/IGN Games. New episodes of Unlocked drop every Thursday on IGN Games, IGN.com, and your favorite podcast platforms. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.